In this video, I'm going to show you how to use Flask-SQLAlchemy with Flask blueprints. So a lot of people have asked me about this recently and I thought I'd create a video about it. So here what I have set up is a virtual environment that already has Flask and Flask-SQLAlchemy installed. And what I want to do is I want to start by creating an app directory. So make directory, and I'll call this my project. And then inside of this my project directory, I need to create a dunder init file. So __init___ .py. And then inside of this dunder init, this is where I'll create the create app function. So from Flask, import Flask, and then I'll create the function. So create app, and then I'll return this app. So next, what I want to do is I want to make sure I can run this in my development environment. So I need to export Flask_app, and this will be equal to my project. And also I can change the environment to development so I can get debug mode working. So if I do Flask run, that should work. Just make sure you're in the base project directory, not in your app directory. So if you can get this far, you know you have that set up correctly. And now what I want to do is I want to start to bring in a model, and then I'll explain what you have to do to make it work. So I'll create a file called models. And this should actually be in my project. So models.py. And in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a user model. So db.model, and then the ID will be an integer, and the primary key will be true. And then I'll just have a name column. So I'm not going to do much with this. So we'll just make that 50. And notice that I'm using DB here, but I don't have it yet, right? And you should also know that when you use any extension in Flask, you have to initialize it. So typically in my videos, I do something like db equals SQLAlchemy and then app. And the reason why I do that in the videos is to cut down on writing code. Like I just want to show you the main point of the video. So I do it this way. But when you're building a real app, you probably don't want to do it this way. Instead, what you want to do is you want to use this. So db.init app, and then pass in the app object, right? So I can get rid of that. But in both cases, you should notice that I'm using db there and db here, but I haven't created it yet. So the main question is, where do I put this? So basically, I'm going to have something like this. From Flask-SQLAlchemy, import SQLAlchemy, just like that. And then I'll do db equals SQLAlchemy, just like this. So I need to have this somewhere, but where should I put it? And this is where everyone gets tripped up. So this is really the point of the video. Once you have this part down, everything else becomes pretty easy. So can I put it here? So I see a lot of tutorials, they'll put it here, right? I see tutorials where they put it here, right? So that's another option. But in both of these cases, it doesn't work very well. And the main issue that you're going to run into is the idea of imports and circular imports. So with the dunder init file, the problem is you're going to have your models file importing from your dunder init. So this is kind of like the entry point of your app, but you have other parts of your app kind of depending on it, where it should be the other way around. It should be your dunder init imports everything from your app and then runs it. You shouldn't have parts of your app importing from dunder init. So this is not going to work. With models, it's kind of a similar thing. You can use the models and have them imported in other files like routes, which I'll show you shortly. But you don't want to do that because you're going to kind of tie this DB with any particular model. And if you want to create more models and more files, then where do you put it? So you don't want to do it here either. So where should you put it? You should create another file for this. So I like to call this extensions. So touch my project and then extensions.py. And now I have this file and I'll put this here. So because I only have one extension, I'm just putting Flask-SQLAlchemy here. But if I had other extensions, I can put them here as well. And I'll show you that later in the video when I use Flask-migrate. So now if I go to dunder init, what I can do is I can say from.extensions import db. And this dot just means basically on the same level as this file. So dundernit and extensions are on the same level, so that's why I use one dot. And then I can do the exact same thing in the models.py, and everything works. Right, so let's see if I can create this database. So first I need to add the configuration for the database. So I'll say SQLAlchemy database URI is equal to SQLite, and then we'll call this db.sqlite3 like I always do. And what I need to do is I need to go into my Python REPL and import some things to get this to work. So typically, if you use like the really basic Flask app structure, then this is really easy. You just import db and then do db.createAll. So let me try that. So what I'll do is I will say from my project import db, and then I'll do db.createAll. And the reason why I'm able to do this is because I'm importing db in dundernit. You should know that it's from extensions, but I can import it from dundernit because I just did that. I'll import it from extensions in a moment. But we see I get this error, no application found, either work inside of a view function or push an application context. That's a typical error when you're using the application factory. So what I want to do instead is I want to say from my project, import db, or let's say from my project dot extensions to keep it consistent. So from my project dot extensions, import db. And then what I also want to do is I want to import that create app function. So from my project, import create app. And then finally, for some reason, you need to import all of your models. So I'll say from my project dot models, import star. So if I had more than one model, then everything gets imported. So now what I need to do to create the database is I can do db.createAll, just like before, but I need to pass in an app, and the app is going to be whatever create app returns. So create app, and I'm calling it, so I need the parentheses. And then I get this warning about the track modifications, but it created the database for me. So now if I open up my SQLite viewer, so my project and then db.sqlite3, and I do .tables, I see users there. If I do .schema, I see it has the ID and the name working. So now let me create a route and a blueprint for that route so you can see how this works if you're using a blueprint. So what I'll do here is I'll create a new file called routes.py. And in here, I'll create a blueprint for like main. So from Flask import blueprints, and I'll say main. So I'm calling this blueprint main. It's going to be blueprints. The name is main, and then I need to pass in dunder name. And then I can use this like any other route. So just on the index, well, how about this? I'll do user and then name. So I'll use this to create new users. So user, say create user, so there are no name collisions. And then I need to pass in the name here. And what I want to do is I want to use my user object, which I'll import in a moment. Name is equal to name. And then db.session.add, and of course I'll import db in a moment. So db.session.add user. So let me actually assign this to a variable. So user equals user name. And then db.session.commit. And then I'll just return something like created user, right? So I need to import both the user class and the db object. So I can do that. I'll say from .extensions, it's on the same level, import db, and it's actually not on the same level, so I'll just move it into this directory here. Now that should be fine. And then I need to import the models.py. So from models.py, import users. And now I should be able to use this. So what I'll do is I'll do flask run. And do I get any errors? It doesn't look like it. Let me just add this configuration value to turn this warning off. So app config, and then we'll just set that to false. Okay, so now I should be able to go to localhost 5000/user, and I'll add a username Anthony. And let's see if I get an error here. So I do get an issue with this, but that's pretty easy to solve. The issue is I've created the blueprint here, but I haven't connected it to my app yet. So to do that, I'll go back to my dunder init and I'll say from.routes import main. And then inside of my create app, I can do app.register blueprints main. So now if I go back to the same place and refresh this, I see created user. So I'll just say Anthony for one and John is the other one. And then let me open up my SQLite database. So my project and then db.sqlite3, select star from user, and I see Anthony and John are there. So we know that this is working with the whole blueprint setup. Okay, so this works just fine. And if your app isn't that big, I think this structure is great. So you can put all of your routes inside of this routes file. If you have more than one blueprint, you can put it here if you want. And then likewise with the models, if you have multiple models, you can put them all here. But what if you wanted to have one file per model and one file per blueprint? Well, you can do that as well. So I'm going to convert this to a format where I have multiple models. So let me start by creating a directory called models. So inside of my project, we'll name this models. And then when I create these directories, I need to add dunder inits inside of them so all of the imports work. So models is going to have dunder init. And then I'll move my models.py inside of models. And this model is the user model. So what I'll do is I'll rename this to user. And then I'll create a second model. So I'll just copy this and it's going to be pretty similar. I'll call this, let's say video.py. And this model will be video. And in addition to the name, let's just say it has a URL as well, just to have second model. Right, so I have my two models here, one in user.py and one in video.py. And I have the dunder init. So now let's see what happens when I run the app. So I get this error message while importing my project, an import error was raised. So this error message is really annoying because it doesn't tell you much. Like obviously there's an import error somewhere, but where is it? And for this, you just kind of have to know what you're trying to achieve and all the places you have to look. So obviously it has something to do with imports. So you want to check the imports that you just did. So let me go over to these two files. So let's take a look at this import first. So from .extensions import db. So if you remember what I said earlier, this first dot means it's on the same level as the file in question. But right here, I'm in this models directory. There is no extensions on the same level. It's actually up one level. So to go up one level, I use another dot. So dot. So dot extensions import db. And I can do the same thing in the video .py, right? So now let me try running this again. And I get another error. And once again, it doesn't tell me much. Right? So I know these are fine. So I'll close these. This extensions is fine. This is the dunder init. But now I'm in my routes.py. So if we look here, .extensions is fine because my routes is on the same level as extensions, but models is a little bit different. So before I just had a file called models, but now I have a directory called models, and in it I have two files. So to get the user, I need to do models.user. So I'm going into the models directory, which is on the same level as routes, and then I'm going inside of user to get the user class. Right? So now let's see if this works. And it does. So if I go back over and create a new user, let's say Stacy. Stacy should have been created. So let me just confirm this in my database. Select star from user, and I see Stacy is there. So now I want to create multiple files for my blueprints. So what I can do here is I can do a similar thing. So I'll create a new directory called routes. Inside of routes, I'll add the dunder init just like I did for models. And then I'll move my routes.py into the routes directory. And then I'll rename this like main. Right? And then I can have another blueprint called API. And for this one, I'll just do pretty much the same thing. So in API, I'll just paste everything over. And how about this? How about we just get one user? So I can get rid of the db.session and I'll just use user.query.filterby name equals Anthony, and then I'll get the first. And then since this is the API, I'll return something like this. So user and then user.name. Okay. So everything should be fine there. I'll rename this API because it's a different blueprint. And now if I try to run my app, I get an error again, of course. So the first thing is I need to bring in this new blueprint and register it like I did the main one. If I go over to my dunder-init for the project, I need to register the blueprint. So app.registerBlueprint API. And of course, I need to import that. So how do I import it? So it's similar to how models work. So routes is a directory on the same level as my dunder-init. So I should be able to do .routes just fine. And then I can do .main to take me into the main.py file. And then I can do a similar thing for API. So from routes.api, import API. And now in these two files, I want to make sure these two imports are okay. So I have from.extensions import db. So is this extensions on the same level? Well, I'm inside of routes. It is not on the same level anymore. So I have to go up one directory and then it's going to be on that level. So ... So I can do that in both files. And then here, the models. Is models on the same level as my main.py? It doesn't look like it. I need to go up one directory into the models directory and then to user. So I'll do ... there and ... there. And then I can do something similar if I wanted to, and I can import the video model that I'm not using. So import video just like that. And imagine I had some code to work with video. So now let's see if this works. And it does. So everything appears to be working. Server is running. I'll add one more user, Will. And then I'll open up my database, select star from user, and I see Will is there. Okay, so if that is how you use SQLAlchemy, then this can be all you need, but I'll show you how to use this with Flask-migrate as well. So what I'll do is I'll install Flask-migrate. So pip install Flask-migrate. And now what I'll do is I'll go over to my extensions.py. So remember, if I'm using extensions, I can instantiate them here. And from Flask-migrate, import migrate. And then I'll just instantiate it. So migrate equals migrate, and nothing goes inside of it. Now in my dunder-init for my project, for my app, I can import migrate from extensions, and then I can initialize it down here. So migrate.init app, you have to pass in both the app and DB. So both of those are fine. And then this should be enough to get it working because setting up Flask-migrate is pretty simple. So what I'll do is I'll remove my database, and then I'll try Flask db init. Okay, so it created the migrations directory for me. Perfect. And then I'll do Flask db migrate. And if I go to my directory and go to versions here, I see it found my user model and my video model, and it's creating the tables for those. So now if I do Flask db upgrade, it should have created my database file. So I'll open that up. So my project db.SQLite3, and then select star from user. Well, actually, do I have the tables there? Yes. So we know this is using Flask-migrate because I have this Alembic version table, and I also have user and video here. And I have nothing in the user table because I just deleted and recreated my database. So for one last time, I'll go back and I'll create my user, Anthony, and then I'll stop the server, open up the database, and then select star from user, and it's there. So this really isn't that complicated as you've seen. Really, it's just knowing how to use the imports and really where to put that first DB equals SQL Alchemy where you instantiate it. Once you get that down, everything works. So if you still have any questions about this, if you want to know how to use it with other extensions, just let me know in the comments down below and I'll try to answer.